At these two brief pieces from Baldwin's collection, Nobody Knows My Name, the introduction, and then the short essay, The Discovery of What It Means to Be an American. James Baldwin is part of a American tradition of writers going to Europe, living in Europe, and I think that it's no accident that he begins the essay Discovery of What It Means to Be an American by quoting Henry James. Henry James, we all have our opinions, of course, and they're just our opinions, but I would say that the greatest American writer, but that's the thing. Was he American or not? Henry James was born an American to an American family, lived part of his childhood in Europe, but mostly grew up in New York City in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, and eventually moved to Europe pretty much full time, England mostly, and wrote novels about English people, but also, and some might say his best work about Americans, and much of that Americans in Europe. So this whole American experience of Europe for a writer is a very important thing in American literature. And Baldwin describing the years that he lives as an expatriate in different European countries is quite important and important for him. And one may say, or one may ask, what is his question, or what is the question about this? And I would say the question is, why does he feel that it's necessary to go back? He has gone to Europe, and it is in Europe that Baldwin has become a writer. He says this in the beginning of the introduction when he's talking about the fact that his youth is over. He says, in the context of my life, the end of my youth was signaled by the reluctant realization that I had indeed become a writer. So far, so good. Now I would have to go the distance. And it's that going the distance, I guess, is really I would say, is the theme here, to go the distance. What does that mean, and what does he need to do to go the distance? I would say that he feels that he needs to return to America. And somehow, even though it was apparently, I would say, going to Europe that kind of made him as a writer, it freed him as a writer. It was necessary for him to get away from the racism of America, to release that pressure, to live for a while at least without that constant pressure of being black in America. That was necessary for his development as a writer. And one may ask, why would you return? If Europe, living in various European countries, um, mostly in Paris, France, has liberated you personally and in your vocation as a writer, why would you return to America? I feel like he feels like he needs to make the next step, and that permanently living in Europe. I think he eventually returned. I know he died in France. I recently saw that. But permanently living in Europe would be to block that development, and that would be a kind of, as he says, a kind of a haven, but to live in a sort of self delusion. Uh, One of the things that he says somewhere, as he says here, havens are high priced. Refuges, uh, although it was necessary for him to go to Europe, staying in Europe would be avoiding things. And as we know, I mean, Baldwin seriously believes that you have to write your personal experience, and that your development as a writer is also your development as a person. And he felt that to stay longer in Europe or stay permanently in Europe would just be avoiding himself. And a form of, as he says, self delusion. One of the things that really interests me, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe we're all alienated to some degree, but I don't know what it means to be black, of course. Um, I'm, I guess I'm what you would describe as a white man. And um, so, what does it mean to rediscover your Americanness while you're in Europe? Now, that I have some inkling of. That is, when we travel abroad, who we are is sort of put in our face. You are not them. Travel in another country, foreign country, different culture, you feel your Americanness more. And I think that, when he describes the common experience of American writers in Europe, black or white or otherwise, that is commonality. They discover that they are American and there's nothing they can do about it. I mean, I guess you could try your hardest to integrate somehow with a European culture, learn the language, but that would be difficult. So one of the things that he discovers as a result of his years living in Europe is his Americanness, and that is not necessarily a bad thing, really. That is, he's not ashamed to be American. He's not. He doesn't think that somehow uh, that's some kind of limitation. In fact, you know, he has some things at the end here that he says that are pretty interesting. Um, he says it is no wonder, in the meantime, that the American writer keeps running off to Europe. He needs sustenance for his journey and the best models he can find. Europe has what we do not have yet, a sense of the mysterious and inexorable limits of life, a sense, in a word, of tragedy. It really does remind me of Henry James. I mean, much of Henry James' work, or some interesting, substantial element of it, is the American experience in Europe. And that's part of it, the realization that you're in a much older culture that's foreign to you and that presents certain possibilities that you didn't even know were there. But on the other hand, um, Baldwin thinks that America has something to offer to Europe. He ends that paragraph by saying, and we have what they sorely need, a new sense of life's possibilities. That's quite interesting. Written, around early 1960s, I guess. The view of that America, the American, the America that Baldwin, in a certain way, um, you know, well, he says he doesn't hate America. That's part of what he's got to get over, or that he's realized, is that he doesn't really hate America. And I think we can see why he says that, because he doesn't hate himself. That is, to fully hate America, for an American, is to some degree to hate yourself. I think is what he's suggesting. Uh, so coming to terms, or making his truce with reality, is really making an acceptance of himself. It's quite amazing, as always. Commentary.